Hey A&Pers, this is Dr. Jones checking in. This is A&P1 Lecture Test 5 video, checks notes 6, and we're starting towards the bottom of page 7 where it says motor neurons innervate, and should hopefully finish up through about half of page 8 on this video. So first, a quiz. So what are these as a group called? Receptors. And what's our root here? Ceptor, C-E-P-T-O-R. If you see ceptor, then you know we're talking about receptors. And all of the receptors as a group are part of which division? Let's see, what division is 5? Or what is 5? Central nervous system. And what are the two parts of the central nervous system? The brain and spinal cord. And what do they do? Information processing. Excellent. So 4 and 6 here together are the peripheral nervous system. And what are the two parts of the peripheral nervous system? Cranial nerves and spinal nerves. Excellent. Now, to be clear, some of the neurons in the cranial nerves and the spinal nerves are sensory neurons, and some of them are motor neurons. The sensory information and the motor information do not go up and down the same neuron, okay? Information can only move one direction on the neuron from the soma to the synaptic knobs, down the length of the axon. And it only travels in one direction. So which division of the peripheral nervous system sends sensory information from the receptors to the central nervous system? And that's afferent. Remember, sensory equals afferent. Okay, so what is this 6? What's all of this together? Efferent. And it's motor. Motor equals efferent. Okay, and what are the 3 types of receptors? Visceral sensory receptors, and what do they monitor? Monitor's your other word here. O-R? E-R. O-R looks good. Visceral sensory is hungry, thirsty, gotta pee, okay? And what about special sensory? Those are your special senses. And they're all in the head. Cephalization, cephalic means head, cephal means head. Cephalization is the part of evolution where all of our special senses kind of migrated into one spot. So that's vision, smelling, taste, 2 in the ears, and those are hearing and balance. And then somatic senses, that's your touch, pressure, vibration, temperature. Of these 3, where do you find interoception? And of these 3, where do you find exteroception? Somatic sensory is also proprioception. Special senses, we're not having that discussion on whether they're interoceptors, exteroceptors, proprios. They're not. That's not. Okay. All right, so for efferent, what are these 8 and 12 together as a group called? The parts that carry out the motor commands are the effectors. See, efferent, effectors. It's almost like they use the same word root or something. Okay, so 8 are the what kind of effectors? The somatic effectors. And what are the somatic effectors? Skeletal muscles. Okay, and then 12 as a group are the visceral effectors. And what are the visceral effectors? Smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and adipose CT. Okay, so of the efferent division, which part controls skeletal muscle? The somatic nervous system. And which part controls the visceral effectors? The ANS, the autonomic nervous system, which is visceral motor. So we've got visceral sensory up here and visceral motor. It's an S. Down here. And here we have somatic sensory. And right here we have somatic motor. No, somatic motor. Okay, so visceral, we sense the viscera, hungry, thirsty, gotta pee, and we also send commands, motor commands to the viscera. Speed up the heart rate, increase digestive juice secretion. If you're nervous, maybe it's to the sweat glands to increase sweat gland activity, because that's always so helpful. ANS, that's why. Yeah. Okay, so there are two ways to control the visceral effectors. One is rest and digest, and what do we call rest and digest? Parasympathetic. And one is fight or flight, or fight and flight and freeze, and that one is sympathetic. Excellent. So of those two, which one increases heart rate? It actually increases heart rate and the force of contraction. So it makes the heart beat harder and more often. That's sympathetic. And so what decreases heart rate and force of contraction? Parasympathetic. Which one of the two, which one innervates the adipose CT? Because sympathetic and parasympathetic don't both innervate adipose CT. Sympathetic does, because if you are running for your life or sword fighting or whatever, then you are breaking down the fats out of the fat cells, releasing it into the bloodstream so that your cells can use that as a backup energy source. Okay, and so sympathetic. And what about smooth muscle? To smooth muscle and the blood vessels that feed your muscles. Now keep in mind here that the smooth muscles in the blood vessels, when they relax, they cause the blood vessel to dilate. And when they constrict, they make less blood get through. So the smooth muscles in the walls of the blood vessels that feed the muscles, sympathetic activation, what's it going to do? It's going to relax them because you want more blood to the muscles when you're running for your life or sword fighting a bear. Don't sword fight with a bear, that would be rude. And same with the smooth muscles in the walls of the bronchi. We talk about bronchodilation and bronchoconstriction. Which do you want in sympathetic activation? Do you want bronchoconstriction? Do you want those smooth muscles to constrict so that less air gets through while you're fighting or flighting? No, you want those smooth muscles to relax so that you get bronchodilation and get more air into your lungs, because air is oxygen to the bloodstream, which is fuel to make ATP so that you can run faster, sword fight longer. Clear as mud? All right. And then here's all of that. Okay, so there we go, 4 different types. What are we talking about? Is this the picture we want? I thought we were on innervate. We're not there yet. Okay, let's do this here. All right, motor neurons. We're here. Motor/efferent neurons. Checking my notes here. Carry somatic and visceral motor commands from the CNS to the effectors. Should have said it on the last page. I already had this all written down. Okay, from the CNS to the effectors, and this half is peripheral nervous system. Okay. So the efferent fibers are the axons of the efferent nerves. It'll be these lines with the arrows showing which direction they're going. And the somatic motor neurons will be in the somatic nervous system, and they will go to skeletal muscles. The visceral motor neurons are the neurons of the autonomic nervous system, which I think I already said. The autonomic ganglia are, is this page? Okay, let's write these down, and then I will draw you the picture and explain it. Let's get this written down first. So the autonomic ganglia are the synapse between the preganglionic neurons and the ganglionic neurons. I know, give me a minute and I will draw you the picture, but let's get all these words down and then we'll make a picture to make sense of it. Okay, so the preganglionic fibers are the axons of the ganglionic neurons. They go from the CNS to the autonomic ganglion. And the postganglionic fibers are the axons of the ganglionic neurons, which go from the ganglion to the visceral effector. So motor neurons form the efferent division of the peripheral nervous system. Efferent neurons deliver motor commands from the CNS to the effectors. Somatic motor neurons make up the somatic nervous system, SNS, and the effectors of the SNS are skeletal muscle. In the SNS, somas are in the CNS, and the axons end at neuromuscular junctions. Not sure if I can make an NMJ tiny enough to go here. Neuromuscular junctions in the peripheral nervous system. Whiteboard time. Nope, wrong button. Right button. White screen. All right. Okay, so we've got CNS here, and then peripheral nervous system here. Excellent. Okay, so we're talking about motor now. So I'm not going to talk about sensory. So this is PNS efferent division. Because okay. Over here, we're going to need the effectors. I don't think it's going to be big enough, but we'll make it work. Okay, so let's do the SNS first. And we have our friendly motor neuron with the Lisa Simpson hair because I can't draw dendrites or dendritic branches. The effector here is the somatic effector, which is skeletal muscle. Skeletal muscle. Okay. So we know that this is a neuromuscular junction, and we know that it uses what neurotransmitter? Acetylcholine. Yeah. So in the SNS, somas are in the CNS. The soma, the cell body, is either in the brain or the spinal cord every time. That's how you move a muscle. And then these, so think about the muscles that move your toes, right? The muscles that move your pinky toe. The somas are in your spine, and your spine ends at like L1, L2-ish. And so these axons go from like your back all the way down your leg to the muscle that moves your toes. Are you wiggling your toes? It's more fun if you wiggle your toes. Okay. All right, I'm going to change color now because I can do that. I'm going green. Okay, so now we've got the ANS. So we're talking about visceral motor. SNS was somatic motor. You got it. Okay, so the SNS, you have a neuron, and it connects to the effectors. Okay, that's the simple part. Now let's do the interesting part. ANS has two neurons. One is in the CNS, and it is before the autonomic ganglion. So it's going to be the preganglionic neuron. I am much better at writing with a mouse now, 8 months into the quarantine. Okay, so the preganglionic neuron, soma, is in the CNS. And then it synapses. Well, okay, it puts out an axon, which is the preganglionic fiber. The preganglionic neuron has a preganglionic fiber. Okay, now I'm trying to write too small and it's getting difficult. Okay. This is an autonomic ganglion. A ganglion is a clump of neuron somas in the peripheral nervous system, and we are, in fact, in the peripheral nervous system here. The other kind of ganglia we will find are sensory ganglia, but this is visceral motor, autonomic. I can hear my daughter giggling. She's playing Minecraft with her friend online. She's got the headphones that plug into the controller, and she got a free texture pack, and so they've got a new world going in Safari, and there's cars, and I walked in, I was like, how do you have cars on Minecraft? It was like, anyway. I don't know if you can hear her in the background, but okay, so we have here an autonomic ganglion. I'm gonna change colors again because I'm a color-coded kind of person. Yeah, I know that's not what they look like. Okay, there's noises outside. I think it's the neighbors. My next door neighbors actually put their house up for sale. I hate getting new neighbors. Okay, so now we have visceral effectors. And the visceral effectors are smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and adipose CT. Okay. So this is the ganglionic cell, because the soma is in the ganglion. So it's the ganglion cell, or ganglion neuron. Ganglionic cell, ganglionic neuron, ganglion cell, ganglion neuron. Same thing. All the same. I forget which one's the new one. I'll put cell and neuron, just in case. And that makes this, and this fiber, this axon, is after the ganglion. So it's the ganglion cell, but its axon is the post-ganglionic fiber because it leaves the ganglion and is after the ganglion. Out of space. I think I dotted that I twice, but we're going with it. Okay. All right. So here's the deal. The ANS is visceral motor, and this whole setup is true of both sympathetic and parasympathetic. I'm out of space, but SYM for sympathetic and para for parasympathetic. Okay. One more thing that you need to know. I don't remember when you need to know it, but you need to know. We said this was a neuromuscular junction and it uses acetylcholine. Okay. This is also a cholinergic neuron. Cholinergic means it uses acetylcholine, ACH. Okay. Here, the parasympathetic system is entirely cholinergic. So the parasympathetic uses ACH. The sympathetic is for flight or flight. And what do you associate with fight or flight? Adrenaline. So there's adrenaline and noradrenaline, and they changed the names. They're now called epinephrine and norepinephrine, which looks like East by Northeast, which sounds like it ought to be a music venue, but so sympathetic pre-ganglionic fiber uses acetylcholine. Sympathetic ganglionic post-ganglionic fiber releases epinephrine or norepinephrine. Parasympathetic pre-ganglionic fiber releases acetylcholine because all the pre-ganglionic fibers release acetylcholine. And the post-ganglionic fiber also releases acetylcholine. So the parasympathetic system is entirely cholinergic. The pre-ganglionic fibers are all cholinergic, whether they're sympathetic or parasympathetic. The ganglionic cells, however, make different neurotransmitters. Sympathetic make epinephrine and norepinephrine, or and. Don't know. Beyond the scope of this class. Okay. Parasympathetic makes and releases acetylcholine. So each neuron, I think it only makes one neurotransmitter. So, okay. So let's finish the writing on page 8. We did the first half of it. We skipped off the effectors, the visceral motor. Visceral motor neurons make up the autonomic nervous system. I lost my place, I looked away from it, ANS. The effectors of the ANS are smooth muscle, cardiac muscle, glands, and fat. In the ANS, somas are in the CNS, and axons called preganglionic fibers end at an autonomic ganglion in the peripheral nervous system where it synapses with a ganglionic neuron. I don't know why it is this way, but it is this way. So it's kind of an it is what it is kind of thing. I'm not sure why, but that's just the way these things are. And not just in humans, it's just the way it is. Okay. The soma of the ganglion cell is in the autonomic ganglion in the peripheral nervous system. And its axon, called a postganglionic fiber, ends at a visceral effector. So the second visceral motor neuron, so this blue neuron is entirely in the peripheral nervous system. It's housed entirely in the PNS. And same, I've mentioned twice already, sensories, afferent, motors, efferent. There's a great place for it, but I think it's more relevant like half a chapter ago. So, oh, and interneurons. Ooh, if we talk about interneurons, interneurons are located between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons. They're housed entirely in the CNS. So they're inside the brain, they're inside the spinal cord, only place to find them. And they play a part in the higher functions. We talked about the higher functions. Memory, planning, learning, reflexes, emotions. These are interneuron things. All right, so this is plenty for one video. We will come back with the next video for the neuroglia. So this has been A&P 1, lecture test 5, video 6, covering pages 7 and 8. We'll start in the next one with lecture video 7 on page 8. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. I want to say this picture is actually more relevant for lecture test 6 than it is for lecture test 5. There's no part of this that you don't need to have memorized for the rest of the semester. So I'm recording this the day before Halloween. So for fall semesters, you need this until after Thanksgiving, beginning of December. Like in the final, you need this test 5, you need this test 6, you need this for the final. Okay. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. The education must go on. Dr. J out.